Gran Turismo 4 was released in Japan on December 28, 2004, around 2 months before its release in other regions. Throughout history, the Japanese NTSC-J releases of Gran Turismo games have been slightly less polished than other versions. In my previous video on Gran Turismo 3's Prize Car Roulette, I showcased a number of exploits exclusive to the NTSC-J version that were patched out in later releases. GT4's many similar oversights on the original NTSC-J version. A massive exploit in particular is the ability to upgrade a car for free due to the game not saving correctly upon switching cars. By setting autosave to restricted, saving in the garage, getting into the car you want to upgrade, buying the upgrades you want, switching to a different card and rebooting the console, you'll be brought back to your original save with your credits intact, though the car you upgraded will magically have all of the upgrades you bought still applied. This is incredibly easy to do and can be done at the start of a playthrough, by getting the B license to obtain the Volkswagen Lupo, buying a cheap used car like the EG Civic, then using the exploit to upgrade the car for free by switching between the Lupo and the car you bought. It's very similar to the trade trick in Gran Turismo 3, which I've made a full video about. Outside of this exploit, many of NTSC-J's region differences range from minor inconveniences to pure oddities. For example, to move to the next license test, you need to return to the license center to select the next test, requiring you to sit through 2 loading screens. Later versions of GT4 added a button to the pre-race menu to move to the next test, a great quality of life improvement. NTSC-J's driving aid sliders are also inverted, meaning TCS1 behaves as if it's fully maxed out, and vice versa. TCS needs to be maxed out in NTSC-J to replicate the behaviour TCS1 in other regions. The recently discovered cheat codes which allow you to mark a race as cleared also work differently. Upon entering the code, the game acknowledges it and plays a sound effect, but upon entering and exiting the race, it gets marked as a second place finish rather than first place. This makes the cheat code effectively useless. While these are all interesting oddities, they're not the topic of today's video. Instead, our story begins with one oddity in particular, the Corvette Z06 C2 race car. The C2 is the prize car from the Corvette 1 make at the Chevrolet dealership. In most versions, it's a decent race car with over 600 horsepower and low grip modifiers in 90 front and 95 rear. While its rear heavy distribution gives a decent rotation and rear traction, it's somewhat let down by its narrow tyres, causing fast tyre wear. The C2's main niche is its ability to equip sports tyres and enter classic car events, which it can win with ease. While Western players generally overlook the C2 race car, Japanese players would instead find themselves confounded by it, as it had become one of the most infamous cars in the game. This is for one simple reason: it was nearly impossible to keep it on the road. For reasons unknown to players at the time, the car had a massive tendency to spin out with even the slightest of turn inputs. This led to much confusion from players online, with Japanese wiki entries mentioning how it's unable to be controlled properly. Many would record and upload their attempts to tame the C2, with only a handful being able to drive clean laps using it. Many came to the conclusion that its uncontrollability was due to its high power output, which was lowered by around 100 horsepower in later versions. However, the full story is far more confusing. Besides power output, there's only one major difference between regions. NTSC-J C2 actually has lower grip modifiers than the other versions, with 88 front grip and 93 rear. On paper, this would mean that the NTSC-J C2 has less responsive handling, but instead, it's the complete opposite. It's clear that raising the car's grip modifier somehow turned it from an undrivable mess to an actually competent car. But how did this happen? This would not be fully understood until very recently. In December 2023, GT Challenge Runner The Gaming Definition uploaded a video "Can you beat Gran Turismo 4 with American cars only?". In this run, he restricted himself to using a road car for Gran Turismo World Championship, and curiously opted for the Buick Special. This was an unusual choice, as while the Special can get around 900 horsepower, it is zero downforce and can't get a GT Auto rear wing. Most opponents in GT World have 63 front downforce and 88 rear, making it extremely difficult to compete with a car that lacks downforce. Not only that, but it also has extremely low grip stats, with 88 front and rear grip modifiers. It also has a very front heavy 60-40 weight distribution, hurting its tyre durability. In theory, the Special should not have been able to compete against prototype race cars, but against all expectations, the Gaming Definition managed to pull off a championship win. Nobody seemed to be able to explain why the Special was able to put in such a convincing performance. We had two reasonable explanations at the time. Its tyre dimensions are quite large, with exceptionally wide 335 width rear tyres. It also has even front and rear grip, which means that, while its overall grip is low, its lack of a rear grip bias means it isn't prone to understeer like many other cars in the game. While these factors do contribute to its handling, there is still much we'd yet to uncover. A few months later, I had a conversation in one of my video's comment sections with Kaz, a Japanese player who regularly tests various cars and posts his findings. Kaz had discovered that the C1 Corvette convertible was performing surprisingly well for him. The C1 has 86 front and rear grip modifiers in all versions of the game, making it the 5th least grippy car in the game on paper, while also having a 60-40 weight distribution. As with the Special, it was difficult to justify why it handled so well. One unique attribute of the C1 is its extremely tall tyres. Every car's acceleration and braking power scales based on the height of its tyres, with taller tyres performing better than short tyres. I made a comparison on my second channel showcasing the differences between tyre dimensions, which I'll link in the description below. As the C1's tyres were among the tallest in the game, Kaz and I found it reasonable to assume that its tyre dimensions were likely the reason why it performed so well. It wouldn't be until over a year later, on October of 2025, when we would finally begin to understand why the Special and C1 Corvette, alongside a handful of other classic cars, were such exceptional performers. In an effort to understand why the NTSC-J C2 Corvette race car handled so poorly, I decided to test various combinations of grip modifiers by editing the SpecDB of the online public beta version of Gran Turismo 4. This allowed me to make changes to any car's hidden stats. By following Silent Warrior's SpecDB guide, which I'll link in the description below, I was able to edit the Mazda RX-7 Spirit Type A's grip modifiers by changing its front and rear performance stats in the chassis table. The RX-7 is a very balanced car, so any changes in grip should be very noticeable. I started by giving it 88 front grip and 93 rear, replicating the C2's grip setup. Much like the C2, it oversteered constantly, establishing the root cause of the C2's instability. I then tested an inverse grip bias of 93 front grip and 88 rear. Fascinatingly, the car felt extremely stable and was practically impossible to oversteer, even with aggressive weight transfer. This is not how a car with a front grip bias should normally handle. For example, the Muse S2000 Street version is 105 front grip and 100 rear, and is incredibly prone to sliding mid-corner. It seemed that something was causing the car's handling behaviour to be inverted. The next logical step was to test how it performs with 88 grip modifiers on both sides, and all of a sudden, it became clear. With these grip modifiers, the car had unnatural handling response and was able to grip 2 corners with ease. This explained why the Buick Special and C1 Corvette had fantastic handling. What I just discovered is, if a car's grip modifiers are 88 or lower, the game gets confused and gives the car way more grip than it's supposed to have. The specifics of this odd behaviour aren't fully understood, but what it essentially meant was, 10 of the game's cars, 7 of which are actually usable in events, had potential far beyond what we assumed on paper. It was then when I remembered a specific detail in Kaz's comment. He was able to beat Grand Canyon hard, one of the most difficult events in the game, using the C1 Corvette. This was very strange at the time, as grip modifiers are one of, if not the most important contributor to off-road performance, as they define how easily the car can hold traction while sliding. Kaz's opponent was the Evo Super Rally car, the grippiest rally car in the game with 105 front and rear grip, yet he was somehow able to best it with the C1. With this in mind, I decided to make a dirt setup for the C1, and upon taking it to Grand Canyon, I couldn't believe what was happening. The car was absolutely glued to the road, in a way that a majority of the game's cars simply aren't. Rear-wheel drives are massively disadvantaged on off-road, as 100% of the car's power goes towards the rear wheels. Only a handful of rear-wheel drives are able to compete in the game's hard events. The O2 NSX Type R is among the best rear-wheel drives for rallying, while the Elise 111R and Type 72 both perform surprisingly well due to their low weight and 105 rear grip. However, the C1 was blowing all of these cars out of the water in almost every regard, despite most of its weight being over the front wheels. With a proper setup, it was able to post 224s around Grand Canyon, which puts it above the majority of the game's 4-wheel drives. In comparison, the Lancia Delta HF rally car, one of the most successful rally cars of all time, struggles to put laps below 230, while generally feeling far worse to drive due to its 95 front and rear grip. Kaz had put forward a fantastic discovery, and I'm ashamed to admit it took me over a year to put his claim to the test, and realise that the C1 was indeed a rally car worth talking about. Not only that, but there were now 6 others of these supergrip classic cars to try out, all of which can equip dirt and snow tyres. So, let's take a look at each one and discuss their potential on both tarmac and off-road surfaces. A few notes before we begin. All of these cars have open differentials, which makes them very prone to wheel spin out of corners. Buying the custom LSD is a must to prevent one wheel peel from occurring, while improving overall stability. They also need the custom transmission to increase their low top speed. We will be applying the gear trick for every car for the closest gear ratios possible without sacrificing top speed. If you're unfamiliar with the gear trick, I have another video explaining how it works. Many of these cars have very front heavy distributions. This isn't too problematic on tarmac, as most of these cars have low power and won't struggle with rear traction. It also gives them very short braking distances. However, it does hinder the traction in off-road due to lack of weight on top of their rear wheels. As such, most of these cars will have rear ballast applied to even out their weight distribution and improve rear grip. Most of these cars lack power, even after upgrades, and therefore benefit from nitrous to improve their straight line speed. If you're playing on an emulator with retro achievements enabled, keep in mind that using nitrous may disqualify the car from earning achievements. I've made tuning setups for dirt and snow for the cars that I deem viable, which I've included in my ultimate guide tune list. This will be linked in the description. All footage shown was recorded on the NTSC-J version of the game. The PAL version has less stable physics due to having 10 less physics calculations per second, meaning that these cars will perform slightly differently. On PAL especially, I recommend leaving the brake balance controller unequipped, as it causes many cars to feel snappy under braking. With all of that out of the way, let's begin. The Subaru 360 can be purchased from the Subaru dealership. A special colour variant can also be won from the 360 Race 1 make. Of the 7 supergrip classic cars, it's easily among the weakest. It can only get 50 horsepower when maxed out. It also has the smallest tyres and shortest wheelbase of any non-carriage car in the game. As mentioned earlier, acceleration scales based on tyre height, which causes the 360 with its tiny tyres to feel extremely sluggish. Its incredibly short wheelbase also works against it. On off-road, it has unstable handling regardless of setup, and is very prone to bouncing. Even with 100 power nitrous, it's incapable of beating Grand Canyon easy. On snow, it feels even more unresponsive and is unable to beat Whistler Ice Race easy. The Mazda Carol appears rarely in the 80s historic used dealership, only appearing 4 times across the game's 700-day cycle. It has many of the same problems as the 360, as it only gets 53 horsepower maxed out with very small tyres. It's also very front heavy with a 60-40 distribution, while weighing 509 kilos. Like the 360, it gets left behind on the easy dirt and snow events, though it feels far easier to control due to its more planted chassis and slightly longer wheelbase. The Volkswagen Beetle 1100 Standard is one for the Beetle Cup 1 make event. This is the first of the Supergrip classic cars that has clear potential. It gets 84 horsepower maxed out, while its rear engine layout gives it a 45-55 distribution. Its tyres are also a big step up in size compared to the 316 Carol, and its longer wheelbase makes it far more predictable. It can be used to good effect in classic car events, particularly shining on city tracks thanks to its snappy handling, though you'll likely need to reset the lineup so the Cobra and Buick Special aren't present. On dirt, the Beetle is capable of winning normal difficulty events, though it heavily relies on 100 power nitrous to do so. It fares better on snow, as it can fully take advantage of its rear heavy distribution out of hairpins. It's even able to win Race 1 of Whistler Ice Race hard with nitrous spam and very skilled driving. Overall, I very much recommend giving this car a try, even if it doesn't reach the heights of the next 4 cars. The Nissan Skyline Sport Coupe can be purchased from the Nissan dealership. Its massive cost of 320k credits will prevent many from trying this car out, though those who give it a chance will be very pleasantly surprised. It gets 187 horsepower maxed out while weighing 1147 kilos after reductions. It's incredibly stable and feels glued to the road on tarmac. It can even compete against the Cobra and Buick Special in classic events. On dirt, it can convincingly win normal races. Some hard races will be winnable, but others will be just slightly out of reach, even with nitrous spam. On snow, it can win Whistler Ice Race hard even without nitrous, though the Corolla and Evo 6 rally cars will offer a much easier time. The Lotus Elan S1 is one from the Lotus Classics 1 make. As the event is limited to the Elan and Europa, you'll first need to win the Europa from British Lightweight Series. It only weighs 581 kilos after reductions, and is incredibly nimble. It can also get 207 horsepower maxed out, more than any car so far. Of the Supergrip classic cars, the Elan is perhaps most famous when it comes to its cornering prowess, though its shorter wheelbase makes it quite difficult to tune properly. Many players opt for this car for classic events, and for good reason. Very few players in comparison, however, have taken the car off-road, which is unfortunate as it has excellent potential potential. It rewards a momentum-based driving style, as it has the ability to float through corners with ease. It can easily beat hard dirt events, particularly shining on tracks with tarmac sections. On Tahiti Maze Reverse, it's even able to overtake the AI in the opening corners. On snow, it displays similar potential, being able to win hard events regardless of the opponent. While it's not the easiest of the Supergrip classic cars to drive, it handsomely rewards those who are patient with it. The Chevrolet C1 Corvette convertible is one from All-American Championship. It requires some effort to obtain, as you'll be competing against race cars. If you want an easy route towards the C1, the Cadillac Cian can be easily tuned to compete in All-American Championship, thanks to its high downforce with the GT Auto rear wing. I discussed this in my Cian optimization video. Performance-wise, the C1 shares a lot in common with the Skyline Coupe, weighing 1112 kilos after reductions with a 60-40 distribution. However, it's better in most areas, despite its lower grip modifiers. With Stage 3 of NA tuning, it can get 368 horsepower maxed out, nearly double that of the Skyline. You can also opt for a supercharger, which sacrifices around 80 horsepower for far more low-end torque. If you're using a supercharger, be sure to use the semi-racing muffler, as equipping the racing muffler alongside all other power upgrades will cause a glitch in the car's torque curve. Around Grand Canyon, it's a couple seconds faster than the Elan, while also being far easier to drive due to its longer wheelbase and larger tyres. It'll easily take care of the hard dirt events. On snow, it's arguably the most well-rounded rear-wheel drive in the game. It's fast without being uncontrollable, especially once you use ballast to improve its rear traction, and can take on any opponent in hard events without relying on nitrous. If you haven't tried taking this car off-road yet, I strongly suggest giving it a try, as you won't believe how well it performs. Finally, the Buick Special can be purchased from the Buick dealership. The Special's massive potential has already been proven, thanks to the Gaming Definition's ability to beat Gran Turismo World Championship with it. However, from a general purpose standpoint, it's a car of many extremes. Its massive power output of over 600 horsepower stock is both its strongest attribute and its biggest downfall, especially once you observe its torque curve. It has poor torque output below 4000 RPM, which isn't too problematic on tarmac, but is especially crippling on off-road. This makes it far more difficult to control than the other Supergrip classic cars, especially considering its 60-40 weight distribution. It requires careful throttle control, traction control, rear ballast, or any combination of the three to navigate it cleanly through corners. It can brute force most events it can enter, though it provides far less of a pleasurable cruise than the C1 or Elan. On dirt, it has the potential to be the fastest rear-wheel drive in the game, but since traction control is automatically disabled on off-road, the demand for clean throttle control is even greater. I recommend equipping only the supercharger and avoiding any other power upgrades, as this will reduce wheel spin and provide cleaner corner exits. On snow, it simply has too much power for its own good, even when stock. It constantly wants to spin out on corner exit, even with max rear ballast. In theory, you can beat the hard events using the Special, but it isn't very fun to drive. I recommend using the C1 or Elan instead. And with that, those are the 7 Supergrip classic cars. To summarise, 2 of them unfortunately lack the power needed to be competitive, 2 are solid underdog picks with limited potential, and the remaining 3 are fantastic when tuned to their niches. What has your experience been with these cars? Have you ever tried bringing them off-road before? Hopefully this video has encouraged you to give these overlooked cars a chance, and push them beyond perceived limits. A massive thank you to my patrons who supported me while making this video, with a special shout out to Salmon Sky 2, Westroad C, CSC, and Asterion SE.